Coming up on Roland Martyr Unfiltered for Monday, April 8th, 2019. Hello, I'm Robert Patillo, sitting in for Roland, who's on the Tom Joyner Morning Show cruise. The Baltimore City Council calls for embattled Mayor Catherine Pugh to resign. She's embroiled in a scandal where her organization and her businesses have forced the city to buy hundreds of thousands of self-published children's books. Also, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx speaks out about attacks on her handling of the Jussie Smollett case in Chicago. The Chicago Police Union and 30 suburban police chiefs have called on her to step down. She won't. We're going to hear more about that. A suspicious and disturbing pattern of 3 fires at black churches in a parish in Louisiana. We'll talk live with a reporter covering the story. A routine traffic stop in Louisville, Kentucky ends with a black teenager in handcuffs. The video shows the fear young black men face in even seemingly routine interactions with police. There is a lot of concern over this video in the community. The head of the local Urban League joins us. Also, Joe Biden and his hands-on style of campaigning has raised the question of whether the Me Too movement has gone too far. Melody Span Cooper, the owner of radio station WVON in Chicago, thinks it has. She joins us live. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martyr Unfiltered. Let's go.
Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
Hi, I'm Robert Patillo, sitting in for Roland Martin. Today, the Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh took another tough political hit today when the entire city council urged her to step down. Pugh put herself on medical leave last week as the scandal intensified over the sale of hundreds of thousands of her children's book to organizations doing business with the city of Baltimore. That book was self-published and seems to have no sales outside of the ones to the organization with contracts before the city. Here's what the city council wrote. Mayor Pugh, the entire membership of the Baltimore City Council believes that it is not in the best interest of the city of Baltimore for you to continue to serve as mayor. We urge you to tender your resignation effective immediately, sincerely. And then, as you can see, signature from all council members. For her part, Mayor Pugh says she will not resign and will return to office as soon as she recovers from pneumonia and regains her health. Also, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx fought back this weekend over charges she mishandled the Jussie Smollett case. Late last week, the Chicago Police Union and over 30 suburban police chiefs called on Foxx to resign. They said that she had preferential treatment as the celebrity when his charges were dropped after some limited community service and forfeiture of his $10,000 bond. Foxx spoke at the news conference at the Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push headquarters on Saturday. I think we have video of that.
I ran for this office in 2015 because I believed that we needed to have a new vision for how we looked at our criminal justice system and the drivers of violence in our community. I promised then that I would run this office differently than anyone who had run it before. I promised then that I would look at how we used our system related to low-level offenders and focus our attention on the violence that plagues so many communities. I have said repeatedly that we have to fix the history in this city or in this county related to wrongful convictions. I have spent the last 2.5 years dedicated to a conviction integrity unit that has vacated over 83 convictions. I have worked to make sure that men and women who were wrongfully accused were able to get their lives back, including 58 men and women who had convictions from a corrupt police officer. The last 2.5 weeks and the attacks on the credibility of me and my office. What I've said continuously when I recused myself from this case was that I was not involved. But I will also say that our office over the course of the last 2.5 years has used diversion or deferred prosecution with great frequency. When people say to me that this appears that you are doing something for someone who is of privilege, I say to you, look at the 5,900 other people who have not had that same privilege. I cannot run an office. I cannot run an office that is driven by anger and public sentiment. I must run an office that looks at the facts, the evidence, and the law on every case. And so I will say to you, I am honored and privileged to serve in this role. I am undaunted by the events of the last 2 weeks. I am committed to serving my term, and should the people have me, continuing forward. I believe that this has sparked a reason for us to have a conversation about where we really stand on criminal justice reform. What we really believe when we talk about the rhetoric of a broken system and fixing it. It means that you have to have fidelity to that. And the efforts that I've had on criminal justice reform that were once celebrated by many in this county that are now being attacked because of one case and one celebrity, I think we have to ask ourselves, what is this really about? I've been asking myself for the last 2 weeks, what is this really about? And as someone who has lived in this city, who came up from the projects of this city to serve as the first African-American woman in this role, it is disheartening to me and to the women and men for whom I represent that there is not a place I go that I don't represent for Cabrini. That's right. That when we get in these positions, that somehow goals post change. That's right. We know that. Somehow when you do the best and that you put our office on national standards, there are people watching what we're doing in Cook County around criminal justice reform, and yet. So I will tell you that this is personal. It's personal.
Joining us today on our panel is Janice Mathis, Executive Director for the National Council of Negro Women, Michael Brown, former Vice Chair of the DNC Finance Committee, and Amisha Cross, a political commentator for Sinclair Broadcast Group. Welcome, everyone. And we're going to toss this to Janice first because you, of course, have worked with Rainbow Push Coalition. You are closely tied to politics in Chicago also. What's your take on the Kim Foxx controversy?
Well, actually, as I listened to that, and that was my first time hearing it, I was listening with the ear of a practicing attorney. And nothing is as sacrosanct as prosecutorial discretion. And what strikes me is that, is there a different standard when a prosecutor looks different than the normal, typical prosecutor? Prosecutors make decisions like this all day, every day, for the wealthy and the privileged and the white and the children of judges and the children of professors, as you know from having lived in Athens, Georgia. First offender, low-level defendants rarely get incarceration. They usually get a first-time slap on the wrist. This is fairly typical. So what makes this case different? And as we look at all these black women who've been elected recently to positions of trust and discretion, we're going to have to make sure that we use one set of rules for everyone. So I think that's what I was looking at more than the sort of rainbow push. That's just like Jesse to have the prosecutor. I mean, Kim Foxx, she was at push all the time before she was elected, all the time she was campaigning, as was Barack Obama at push all the time when he was a state senator. So it's not unusual for people to go there, especially when they're in a little bit of trouble. Mm-hmm. Nothing like having the godfather of soul standing there with you when times get a little tough.
Misha, you're Chicagoan. What's your take on this?
Absolutely. So I've known Kim for a long time, actually worked on her campaign and served on her transition team. I think that, as was previously stated, you have someone who used prosecutorial discretion, who has come out and said there was not enough evidence there to be able to actually prosecute him in that way. So I think that it was very smart. In addition to the fact that there has to be an understanding that the police officers across Cook County, as well as those within CPD themselves, have had a hard line against Kim Foxx since she took that office, in particular because of the extreme changes that she was going to make to the system. Criminal justice reform in Chicago has been a long time coming. Police brutality cases continue to mount, and we know that. We have watched police officers just last week bust down the home of a single mom with 4 kids, weapons drawn on the mom and the children, find out they're at the wrong house. this type of thing happens in Chicago all of the time. In addition to, again, countless cases upon cases of officers getting off, even though we have video evidence and everything else of them committing brutal acts against black men and black women. And Kim Foxx came in with the strategy of cleaning that up. She came in with the strategy of reducing sentencing. She came in looking at a lot of the drug charges and seeing that marijuana was the cause that a lot of up and their dreams shattered in the city of Chicago. And I think that for anyone who was a voter in the city who understood what the city looked like before she got there and the work that she's been doing, the move to protect her is very real.
Absolutely. And the only time I've ever had a gun pointed to my head in my life was a Chicago police officer right next to the old LA Fitness in Chicago at 47th and right there at 47th and Drexel. So City of Chicago police have more stuff to worry about than Jesse Smollett. Clean up your city and quit worrying about that. Next story, three suspicious fires at black churches in St. Landry Parish in Louisiana. The state's top arson investigators said late last week that they discovered several patterns at the three crime scenes. State Fire Marshal Butch Browning did not explicitly link the three. The churches are St. Mary's Baptist Church in Port Barre, Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, and Greater Union Baptist Church, both in and around Opelousas, Louisiana. Greater Union has served worshipers for over 100 years. Reverend Gerald Toussaint is the pastor of Mount Pleasant and told ABC News that the church is not that building, the church is the people. The burning of the black churches has a long and sordid history in America. During Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement, black churches were regularly targeted with bombings, violence, and fire. We all remember that Dylan Roof murdered 9 people at the Mother Emanuel Baptist Church in Charleston, South Carolina, not as well known as the nearly 200 years before Emanuel AME's predecessor had been burned down in 1822. Charleston's white civic leaders feared an insurrection by the city's enslaved residents. Joining us now is Ashley White, a reporter from the Daily Advisor in Lafayette, Louisiana. Miss White, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So give us some context from on the ground, what exactly these churches meant and what the investigation around it entails.
So state authorities have not linked these fires together yet. They've gotten really close to saying that they're linked, that there are patterns between all three of them, but haven't come out right and said it yet. But these churches are really important to these communities. St. Landry Parish is about 40% black, and so these churches mean a lot, and they've been around for a long time. As you were saying, at least 2 of them are 100-year-old churches.
And with that, what are people in the community saying about these? Do they think these are just 3 random incidents, or do they see a link between them?
The church leaders think that there's a link between them. And I think they're waiting for the authorities to come out and say that. But they're also being really supportive of each other. And the churches that are still standing are opening up their doors to these churches who have been affected by this.
And you said that other communities rallying around these churches. What are the plans to rebuild, or have they even gotten that far yet?
They haven't gotten that far yet, as far as I can tell. I spoke to one of the reverends today, and they haven't even really started accepting any sort of funds to start rebuilding. I think they're still kind of in shock a little bit, and are still waiting for the investigators to wrap up anything that they need to do before they start moving forward.
Have there been any plans to heighten security around other churches in the parish, or other measures being taken to secure other historic black churches?
The sheriff in the parish has stepped up patrols in the area, and part of the problem with these churches is that they're in really secluded areas of this parish. So it may have made it a little bit easier for these fires to happen. And other people have suggested to the reverends that they install security systems just to keep an eye on their churches.
And you said other churches in the area are opening up their doors to try to bring these parishioners in, get them somewhere to worship. For people who might want to donate or be involved, have they set up any apparatus of that nature, GoFundMe pages, anything like that for people who want to help support these church members?
Not yet. I've got in contact with one reverend today, and have reached out to the other two to ask them that exact question. And one of them has said that anyone who wants to donate should reach out to him directly. And that is the Reverend at Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. But the other two haven't said anything.
And with that, how is the local press working to make sure that the word gets out on this? Because I think part of the vigilance that will come, part of people being able to protect their churches will come from knowing more about this. So how's the local press covering this?
We are reaching out to the state authorities, and they're keeping us as much in the loop as they can. We're all keeping in contact with the reverends and seeing what they need and how they're doing on a day-by-day basis. And we're just trying to keep in contact as much as possible, and the state authorities are being as communicative as they can.
All right. Well, we want to thank you so much for your vigilance on this story, and keep us informed of any new developments, particularly if we determine that these church burnings were linked. Thank you so much, Ms. White.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to go back to the panel. Michael, what's your take on this? Do you think that there is a connection between these church burnings?
I think that's pretty clear. I think the issue is what to do about them and how to keep them from happening. That's the problem. I mean, we know today the Revolutionary Guard in Iran was slapped with the terrorist tag. I don't know how white supremacist groups haven't been slapped with that same tag, because they caused so much more harm in this country recently than anyone with of Arab descent or that's a Muslim. So it seems to me that the playing field is not level, and folks aren't being treated the same. I have no problem if I don't call him I call him 45. If he decides to slap the terrorist tag on that group, fine. So slap the terrorist tag on these white supremacist groups as well.
Janice, how would that work? How would we be able to identify kind of an ambiguous idea as being a terrorist group? Because the group, they changed their names, they changed their affiliation, but the same ideology stands. How exactly can we fight back against this rise in white supremacy?
You're reminding me of the question that Facebook has been asking themselves for the last month or so, and finally they came down on the right side, that there is no distinction between white supremacy and terrorism and xenophobia. All these philosophies sort of blend together. I tell you, they may not be linked to each other, but I tell you what they are linked to. They all linked to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the sense of permission that people have to express their basest fears and their worst nightmares in action. I have no doubt about it. I think about the work of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and certainly they keep statistics and they keep watch. And we used to have a Justice Department that kept active watch on suspected terrorists, and certainly some of these violent types ought to be on those watch lists as well.
And Amisha, it's interesting because these attacks, as we said in the opening, are always linked to black churches, because they know that's where we organize. They know that's where the spirit, the heart, the soul of community is. Why do you think these groups are expanding their attacks on black churches at this time?
Because we have an election coming up in 2020. Also, to your point, the organization of the black community has always had its epicenter at the black church. It is the one place where you have growth in ideology, growth in thought. You have people who are moving towards making sure that major policy decisions are made. This is where you get the boots on the ground. This is where you get the majority of the people in the community to come together around a single thought or around a single approach. I think that it is extremely tragic, but I also find it problematic that leaders in Louisiana are not calling this out more fervently. If this had happened and it was another group or another group of individuals, let's say it was the Muslim community, you would hear something that's very different. Jewish community, you would hear something that's very different. When it happens to the black community, it is really shameful that we have, first and foremost, have a president who seemingly carte blanche is okay with this going on. He has not rebuked it in any real form, but he has also given rise to people who already had these innate senses and thoughts amongst themselves, but now feel it necessary to act those out. And I think that as we continue moving forward and watching the rhetoric of this president and this administration continue to go unchecked, you're going to see more issues of violence against African Americans.
Well, on that point, Michael, you're a former DNC finance chair. We see a lot of politicians show up at black churches around election season. They'll sit in the pews, they'll shake the tambourine, they'll kiss the first lady, all those things. But when black churches are getting burnt down, they get very recalcitrant in calling those things out and actually supporting those churches, actually putting police guards around those churches. It shouldn't be the onus just on the churches. If you know these churches are in danger of being attacked by white supremacists, then station some police officers out there. You'll go there to get elected, but for some reason people don't feel the need to go there and address these issues when the church is under attack. How do we fix that?
And of course, full disclosure, as a former elected official here in D.C., depending on the pastor, they won't let you come in and out. You got to sit for the whole service.
Yes.
And
hey,
so,
I pay the love offering. Love offering is real.
When you run for office, you get a lot of church. But you know, I think you're right. There has to be a partnership between the communities, the police departments, the elected officials, and the churches. And you know, but if you talk to some pastors, they don't like a police presence. So it's almost on a case by case because they don't want people thinking that they're in danger, and they want people to come and worship in peace. So it goes, I think, in both ways. I know a lot of synagogues feel the same way. A lot of mosques feel the same way, and temples. So I think it's a case by case, but you have to have dialogue. What does that particular church community want?
And Janice, this is part of a series of attacks across the country. You know, one church, I believe, somebody spray painted "Vote Trump" on the front of the church. We've had other racist propaganda and anti-Semitic propaganda, swastikas outside of black churches nationwide. What is the proper way for us as a community to address these things without having, you know, armed Black Panthers outside these churches? What is our way of combating this rise in nationalistic, white supremacist thinking nationwide?
I think one thing we have to recognize is that it is not just a national phenomenon. If you look across Europe, you see the same sort of sentiment arising. And generally, it comes from loathing and fear and a sense of insecurity among people that I don't fit in anymore. If you go to some places in the South and some places in the middle of the country, people feel left out and passed by, that the American dream is no longer real for them and their children. So I think we have to have a real discussion about what it means to be not just an American, but a world citizen almost. Look at Brexit. Look at what they're going through.
The yellow
it's almost
almost
reminiscent of what Europe probably looked like in the mid-1930s. And so you do have to, you know, without being fear-mongering, you have to ask yourself, where does the xenophobia, how can we calm this spirit that I'm being left behind?
And it's interesting that the removal of privilege is now being spun as oppression by these groups. That the same groups who they claim their ancestors came here and founded this great nation, no, they came up, they got free land, and then for a few hundred years they got free land and free labor, and therefore they got ahead. And now that the playing field's getting even just the most slight bit evened, now that you have black presidents and senators and mayors and congress people and CEOs, all of a sudden they feel they're being oppressed and they need to fight back. And that's where a lot of this white nationalist way of thinking came from. Last comment, Amisha, should we as a community, our generation in particular has stepped away from the black church. Now, many people in our age group just aren't showing up every Sunday. We're big attendees at Bedside Baptist. Should there be a re-emphasis on getting young people back into the church and having them support these organizations?
I absolutely think that there should, but there also has to be a response from the church to young people's needs. As a millennial, I can say that I grew up in the church with my grandparents, but as an adult, it is very hard. On the south side of Chicago, I see young people who can't find jobs, young people who live in gun and gang violence infested communities, young people who don't have anything to do because the after-school programs have been shut down. The church is not wrapping their arms around those individuals. And to tell young people that you need to go to something and you're watching them not really do anything for this group is a very hard sell. At the end of the day, it can't be that, well, my grandparents went, so the expectation is that I'll go, because that tradition has continued to die. But in addition to that, there also has to be some feedback and some wraparound to these young people who often are lost in things I think the church has historically been able to solve.
Yeah, and for some of these pastors, stop wearing $3,000 sneakers during your sermons. Just put that out there. Not a good look for an impoverished community when the pastor's buying, Lamborghinis. Let's just, even it out a little bit. All right, let's take a break. Back with more Roland Martin Unfiltered in just a moment.
Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications.
And now a word from one of our partners. You have plenty of pictures in your home, but you've never seen anything like this before. Introducing Easy Tile, the world's first photo tile made of sleek and ultra lightweight glass. Easy Tile makes it super simple for you to use their exclusive app for iPhone and Android to upload as many photos as you like. Then they print them out on tempered glass. Your order arrives on your doorstep in just days, and that's when the real fun begins. Because with Easy Tile, you'll transform your living space with a gallery wall that will amaze each and every guest. Easy tiles are even simple to hang. No hammer and no nails. And because they're mounted on small risers, they appear to float on your wall. Easy to order, easy to hang, and guaranteed for life. Now you can save 30% on any sized order, plus get free shipping on the order of 4 or more. Just download the free Easy Tile app at easytile.com and turn your best memories into beautiful glass wall art. Plus save big now with this special radio offer. That's easytile.com.
Hey fam, want to check out Roland Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
Look, there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop if you are a black man. Going through your mind is a fear that you will be beaten or tased or even shot. Thanks to newly released body cam footage, we can see this all play out for teenager Tayon Lee and his mother in Louisville, Kentucky last summer. He was pulled over for an improper right turn. The body cam footage of nearly 18 minutes long, we have edited down to 6 minutes, but even at that length, you will get the picture of what happened. Let's go to the video.
You know what I'm stopping you for? Man, when you turned on here onto Dixie, or 18th Street, you turned in the far left lane, you're supposed to turn in the right lane. So there's 2 lanes. That's the reason why, man. Are there any weapons in your car? No drugs? Awesome, man. Do you have your ID?
I have everything.
No, you ain't got any guns, right? You good, man?
Mom's on speaker.
That's cool, man. No. Do me a favor, put your hands on the steering wheel.
Open it up the door.
Yeah, man, do me a favor, grab your phone and your watch, stick it on the
Why?
because I'm telling you, or it's going to fall out when you get out of the vehicle.
Why are you taking me out the vehicle?
I'll move it up here for you.
Mama, they taking me out the vehicle.
Don't hop out?
Get out of the car. They telling me to get out the car now.
And that's the reason why I didn't want anything on you. I don't want to break your phone, brother.
Right.
You don't have any weapons on you, do you?
I don't.
No drugs?
Nope.
Awesome, man. Turn around, put your hands on the car for me. Switch feet.
I didn't did anything. Why are you checking me for?
I didn't say you did anything. So you don't have any...
Why did you take me out the car?
Do you have any drugs, weapons on you?
I don't. I told you that when you asked me
check?
the first time. I do mine.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to make sure you don't have any weapons, okay?
No.
Yeah. We're allowed to pat you down.
Take a step off the
Why would
vehicle,
they pat
please.
me down?
So you say I can't search. So can I search your car?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, unfortunately, you did a traffic violation right in front of us. Just do me a favor, hang tight. I'm going to talk to my canine partner, okay?
Quit doing the clenching your fist thing, too.
Dude, that's some bullshit, man.
What's bullcrap?
Fucking only day I got off, I just want to go home.
We're allowed to get people out of the car. Your heart is beating through your chest when you're on the phone with your mama, and you're narrating to your mom, Mom, I stopped by the police. This is where I'm at. They're getting me out of the car. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When you do all that, it's the same thing that people do when they're trying to hide something from the police and they're trying to take the situation off of it. Just like you're looking back at my partner over and over and over again, like you're waiting for him to see something or for him to do something wrong. It's 2018, young man. We all wear body cameras. It's recording all of it. It records your audio, my audio. It records all that. So guess what happens? If there was something in that vehicle and we go to trial over it, guess what? The jury your attitude, okay? So bring it down. There's no point in it. We're here for you, man. Put your hands on your back real quick. Put your hands on your back. I'm not going to have you run like that. There's the dog indicated on your vehicle. I don't know what's in your car, but like I said, I don't want you to run. So you're still just being detained. You're not free to go, but you're not under arrest at this time. I just don't want you to go anywhere, okay? But I'm not going to fight you, and I'm certainly not going to chase you. I had to chase some guy last night, and I haven't recovered from it. So I'm not chasing you today, okay?
I'm the detective that pulled him over. Okay. So basically, he committed a traffic violation right in front of me.
What did he do?
He conducted an improper turn on the 18th Street.
I was on the phone with him the whole way.
Okay.
He said you were following him the whole way. Okay. There was no improper turn.
Okay. Well,
and he didn't give you.
Luckily enough for you, ma'am. Luckily enough for you, everything was captured on body camera. Okay.
No, luckily enough for you.
Oh, really?
But
okay.
He didn't give you permission.
Okay.
To search
We
the
don't
car.
need his permission,
Yes,
ma'am.
you do.
We had a positive indication by the K9. Okay.
Oh my God.
So, ma'am, you guys are more than welcome to watch, videotape, whatever. Just do me a favor, give us some room and stay over here, please. Ma'am, please stay over here. You're trespassing on private property right now.
It's for sale.
Ma'am, stay over there, please. If you approach my traffic stop, I will take you. Ma'am, if you approach my traffic stop, I will take you to jail. I don't care. I do not care.
I don't care either.
You know what? Okay, great.
You've been in trouble before? Anything as a juvenile at all? Okay.
I'm fucking private investigator. Fucking ain't never did shit.
I appreciate y'all being out here for violent crimes. My son's not violent, nothing. You run his name, he's never been in JCYC, nothing. He got a job.
No one said he was a violent crime.
No one said he was. Be out the car handcuffed right now.
Can you tell me how to pick out violent crime? Can you tell me how?
I don't need to tell you how, because they can run across the street too fast and then say it's violent. It don't matter at this point. It's your own discretion.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. The reason why you took him out of that car is because you're doing some violent trafficking.
Why do you have, if you don't mind me asking, why do you have like this negative view towards the police? What's the deal? What's ever happened in your life personally where you're like, you can give me a good explanation?
Absolutely nothing.
Really?
Fucking when I graduated, I got a good ass job.
Right.
I graduated with 3 full-ride band scholarships. I never did shit in my life. I've been in the house all day.
So what's the problem? Like, why are we in this situation?
You?
Huh?
What you mean?
We didn't do it.
Pull me over?
We made a traffic stop for your violation that you did.
All right, man. I don't want to talk.
And then you went up here with it. Huh? You did the entire time. I just figured I'd try to understand it, but that's fine. Huh? I'll never understand? If I take you out of these handcuffs while he's finishing up, are you going to fight me or run or anything like that? Because initially when we brought you to the back of the car, you're clenching up your fists like you're going to fight or punch or run or whatever. And you've been doing this pacing back and forth thing the entire time. I'll go ahead and take you out of cuffs, but I don't want you to like take off, run into your car or fight me. Is that cool? I know you're mad. It is what it is, but I'll take you out of them since they're a little uncomfortable. Is that cool? Huh?
You're gonna take me out of them, man.
Is it cool? You gonna be chill?
Yeah, I'm gonna be chill.
All right.
The young man had no criminal record, no drugs or weapons were found. The ticket was dismissed when neither of the officers who wrote it even bothered to show up to court. So it was all for nothing. Joining us now is Sadiq Reynolds, President and CEO of the Louisville Urban League. Sadiq, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. It's Sadiqua, actually.
Sadiqua, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So in this video, we see a perfect example of profiling, because if people notice it's a Dodge Charger and you practice criminal defense, you know that a young black man in a Dodge Charger is going to get pulled over. So how is the community reacting to this?
The community is pretty upset, actually, and it's more than just being in a Dodge Charger. The frustration for a lot of community members, myself included, is the location. We know that someone on another part of town would not have been treated in the way that this young man was, and we're very concerned. It's not the first case. I think, this is a city that's really trying hard to be more inclusive, to make strides around diversity and inclusion, and this is just another black mark. And so we have got to work hard. Our police department really does have to do a better job.
And what are city leaders saying about this? Has there been any efforts to retrain, reform, anything being put in place to stop this from happening in the future?
I don't have an answer for that. Certainly, community members are pushing for some additional training. If this is, in fact, policy, I mean, if you think about the dogs in the 60s and what that feels like to have this young man waiting on the side of the road until they can get the dogs. And that's where I think they run into a legality issue, right? So they have the right to pull him over. That's fine. They pulled him over. They said he made a wide right. But there's no indication, there's no reason for us to believe that they have a reason to keep him held there until they can bring those dogs in. It just doesn't make sense. And this is not the first time this has happened. We actually, as you know, I'm the president of the Louisville Urban League, and one of our board members happens to be the chief circuit judge. And there was an opinion from a 2016 case that says you cannot do this. You can't hold somebody on the side of the road waiting for the dogs to come. There's no probable cause for that.
So what's the advice for young people, particularly for young African-American males, when they are interacting with police? Because in this case, this young man did everything that we tell them they're supposed to do. You keep both hands on the steering wheel, you don't make any sudden movements, you answer respectively, and he still found himself in handcuffs on the side of the road. So what advice can we give this young generation in interactions with police?
I think we have to continue to tell them to do what he did. Keep your hands in sight, follow instructions. I understand that he used some foul language, and some people may be upset about that, but I think he really was very composed. The sad part for us as adults is I don't know what we tell our children. I mean, that is the scary part. I don't know how we protect ourselves. What do we do? Because even when we are following the law, we're at risk. And so I've really been frustrated with thinking about what it would be like to be the mother on the side of the road there and having to watch this happen with your child. I mean, a mother's charge is to protect and to not be in a position to be able to do that. And your child is doing everything you said do, and it's not good enough. I mean, because the condescending conversation, the poking, the provocation, the asking about the juvenile record, all of those things. All we can do is tell our children to comply, do what he did. Call your mom, call somebody when you're getting pulled over, and it still may not work, baby. I guess it worked in a way. He's alive.
Well, and that's a great point that you bring up about him being alive, because I think the body cameras are probably what kept that boy alive and from getting into even more trouble. When did body cameras become mandatory in Louisville, and what can we do to kind of push that in other areas?
I think we've been using body cameras here for at least 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been. And what's interesting to me about the body cameras is it seemed as though those officers really thought they were very aware of the cameras, very aware that they were being recorded, and I think they felt very good about their interaction, which I think speaks volumes about the difference in how community feels they should be interacting with police versus how police feel they should be interacting with the community. Body cameras are a good thing, but I also think this country is going to have to be responsive when we see these sort of negative interactions, when we see, this wasn't a shooting, thank God, but we've seen plenty of that, and it's all caught on tape. And so we've got to really make some decisions about how it is that we progress as a country, and certainly Louisville has to make some decisions about what we do moving forward as a city.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing in the community, Ms. Reynolds. And I think it's important to use this as a teaching moment for other police and other jurisdictions to analyze how they interact with young African Americans in this issue of racial profiling. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, I want to hop back over to the panel. Amisha, you work intimately with criminal justice reform. I know police officers and police unions who will say they saw nothing wrong with what officers did there. How can we break that divide where officers think that's a completely fine interaction, but we know as a community that chilling that effect that can have on our young people, not just now, but potentially for the rest of that young man's life and for the lives of others?
There has to be more training and understanding amongst the police officers themselves as to how they are viewed in the community. I think that from working on both sides of this, with the community as well as with the police officers, there is a huge disconnect among officers themselves about their actions And I don't mean just in terms of police brutality. I mean in terms of their presence, in terms of the way that they speak to young black males, in terms of them automatically viewing them as being guilty of something or having the potential to be violent, even if there is no presence of violence available, just because of the community that they come from or because of the beat that they are actually charged to protect. It's a problem because you often see that these two groups don't necessarily speak to each other. And in the cases that they do, there is automatic blaming. And on the police side of things, it is, well, this many people got shot on this block within a certain length of time, so they feel as though they have to be extremely protective of themselves, even though in many cases they're talking to 13 and 14-year-old kids who are just being kids. And I think that the more that we have those honest communications amongst the two groups, and we also bring the parents in, we also coordinate with the schools, because there has to be a strong recognition that these police are doing the same things in our schools, that we're going to see some resolution to it. But right now, we're just not having as many of those conversations as we should be having, and the ones that we're having aren't necessarily coming out with any concrete resolutions.
Janice, you've talked about the overcriminalization of young black males for as long as I've known you. And as I was mentioning earlier, the only time I've ever had a gun put in my head was by a Chicago police officer. I was actually coming back from the law library, took the bus down to Lake Shore and 47th, was walking down at about 12 o'clock at night. It was about maybe 5 degrees, so I had a hoodie on, and next thing you know, I'm on the hood of a Chicago police car with a gun to my head. They searched me and then just sent me about my merry way, and that was it. And so many young men have this interaction, and if you're not in law school, if you're just some dude getting off work, going back home, maybe you don't have that same interaction. Or if you have, a small amount of marijuana on you, the same thing people are making millions of dollars for now, you end up spending the night in the Cook County Jail. How do we fix these structural issues of inequity in the criminal justice system?
You put your finger, I think, on the right issue, and that is the structure of things. For example, what difference would it make if individual police officers had to carry liability insurance and didn't have the mantle of respondeat superior or sovereign immunity to protect them? What if, rather than thinking about training, because I'm not sure this is an issue of training, with all due respect. I know we hear that a lot. I think we need to do a better job of screening. There are some people who don't have the temperament or the point of view to be good police officers. They make prejudgments, they've got certain kind of prejudgments about people that makes it impossible for them to be objective. In that video, you could look and see the officer was baiting. He wanted the young man to overreact. The handcuffing was an invitation to overreact rather than de-escalating the situation. You can't train that out of somebody whose attitude is that. So I think on the front end, we need to pay them better. We need to require more of them. They need to carry personal liability insurance so that they have to know that if this happens on your beat and you're not able to comply, then you're going to pay a personal price and not just a price from the law enforcement agency that you work for. But it is a terrible, terrible problem.
And Michael, on this point, it seems like there has to be a legislative initiative on this. That often this happens in cities where we have elected officials that depend on our community to get elected, but are very recalcitrant when it comes to actually putting policies in place out of fear of the police union. We saw with Kim Foxx earlier, fear of being criticized and drugged through the mud in the media. How can we get our politicians to take this issue as seriously as any other issue?
Well, first of all, I co-sign with everything that the previous guest said. I think she said it eloquently and perfectly. I also want to commend the young man, because with a parent with sons, that's exactly what I taught him, and he did exactly what you're supposed to do. And it still didn't quite work out, except for, as she mentioned, he's alive. So it worked out. Cameras certainly are helpful, but we've also seen cameras and videos that are rolling when bad things happen. So that's not always it helps. Certainly in this case it did. It's a great deterrent. Legislatively, the reason it's difficult, yes, police union, as you mentioned, is part of it. But it's also part of it as cities now are are gentrifying. And you have this clash between kind of the new, in most cities you have kind of old white communities with money. Now you have cities where kind of young millennials are moving in and forcing African-American families out. And so you have this clash. So legislatively, yeah, it's not just the police union, it's also people that want to have a safe city. And if that means somebody has to be inconvenienced, they have to be inconvenienced. That's the thought of some people. So legislatively, it's extremely difficult. Same with police shootings. Roland and I have talked about it a million times. They're going to continue to happen, but the standard in a courtroom is so different for a police officer. All he or she has to say is, I felt in danger and I'm justified, and they walk out of the courtroom. So there's several different steps, very difficult to tackle.
All right, well, we're talking about a Green New Deal and abolishing the Electoral College and all these other big-minded ideas, reparations and universal basic income. I think we should hold all of our people running in 2020 to the standard of, what are you going to do about black folks getting shot? How about we start with that as your initial call to the black community? Speaking of 2020, former Vice President and likely 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden has been hammered in the last 2 weeks or so for his hands-on style of campaigning. The complaints have come from women claiming that his touching of them made them feel uncomfortable. No one is complaining about sexual assault or misconduct. It's more that they feel their personal space had been invaded, or that they did not give him permission to touch them, or that it was just creepy. As a result of the Biden controversy, many politicians and activists have been reluctant to suggest that that identifying it as Me Too could be a stretch and maybe even dangerous. Could there be a male backlash over Me Too when it's so loosely applied? Joining me to talk about this is Melody Spann Cooper, chairman of Midwest Broadcasting Corporation, owner of WVON Radio in Chicago. Welcome, Ms. Cooper.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And before we get started, I have to acknowledge Misha, who is a dear mentee of mine and doing such tremendous work, as well as Sister Janice Mathis, who I've known over the years through her work at Rainbow Push. So thank you for having me on.
The Chicago folks.
Yeah, look, the Chicago connection is strong in here.
Chi-Town.
I might start cooking some Harold in the back office.
Salt,
pepper, mild sauce, fried hard, bread on the top. Just letting you know. All right, but
you got to interpret that.
Yeah, you got to say it all really quickly. Because the person behind you in line does not have time to be playing around with you. So,
that's right.
But, it was interesting reading your article on this, because Friday, I wrote a very similar article and forgot to publish it. And then when I read yours, I was like, yours is way better. So on this idea of the widening of the Me Too movement, it started off R. Kelly. Bill Cosby has people drugged and knocked out for 50 years. R. Kelly got a sex dungeon full of children. Harvey Weinstein is raping people left and right. And now it seems to have gone to, he made me feel kind of creepy. So how do we find a middle ground and a manageable standard for this?
Well, we have to do that. I actually wrote the article based on, even before all of this happened, with the exception of Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein, I'm writing a book called The Girlfriend's Guide to Closing the Deal. And I talked about the hashtag Me Too movement in this book and how women at the table, we're always one or two of us at the table, and men having to negotiate how to deal with us in this Me Too movement. I actually started walking in rooms with gentlemen I've known for years, and they are extending their hands for a handshake versus the hug that we used to get, because we know one another and because we like one another, we care about one another. And I think we set a dangerous precedent for women who could stand to be set back tremendously if we think that men are going to negotiate this. And I talk to ladies and tell them that men still rule the world. 94% of our corporations are being headed by men. And as we fight for equity in the boardroom and we fight for equity at the table where the deals are being done, it's going to be difficult for men to make a choice for us to sit there for fear of this hashtag Me Too. And can I hug her, or can I compliment her on her pearls? It's a bit much. We've got to find a common ground where we can all sit there equitably and bring our best talents and wherewithal, and not make men feel that any slight, indignation will cause them to lose their jobs, lose their positions, and their livelihoods.
And it was interesting in the article because you talked about your father told you somebody steps on your toe to say ouch, as a way of making the point that if these women had simply just turned around and said, hey man, back off real quick, then this would have not. Why wait 10 years until the guy's running for president to bring up that you felt uncomfortable instead of telling him when he was next to you? And it kind of, for me, it paints women into this image that we've been trying to get away from, of being helpless, being fragile, being damsels in distress who can't deal with their own issues. I've seen Janice Mathis bring 6'5" men to tears. I mean, just with one look. So I'm used to strong women like that. What do you think will happen if we continue expanding this?
Well, you know, one thing, it's up for exploration because women who are victims of sexual assault, sexual molestation, oftentimes are embarrassed to talk about it. These are not instances of sexual abuse, but they fall in the area of inappropriateness, right? And I use this example as I've been talking about this. This generation that has come up and is empowered by this hashtag Me Too, they're a different generation. You all remember Family Feud, and Richard Dawson would actually kiss on the lips every woman that was a contestant, right? Today, that would be a hashtag Me Too movement issue. Back then, it wasn't. And so we have to be patient on both sides as we figure out how to navigate this. But I will tell young women this. You don't have to embarrass a person, but you can do, like we just said Janice has done. You have to reach a level of confidence and involvement where if Mr. Biden or anybody else comes up and it makes you feel inappropriate, you feel that their actions or interactions with you are inappropriate. Hi, Mr. Biden, it is really nice to meet you. I just want you to know I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable that you are in my personal space. Now, that is respectful, and the most important thing it will do, it will allow him to back up. And it will allow him to keep his job, continue to run for president of the United States without making it this big national attention. Women, we have to, if we're going to be in control, if we're going to be empowered, then we have to have that in every part of our being and not be afraid to honor our personal space and let people know that when they step on our toe, we're in pain. And just yell, ouch, like my dad said.
All right, great article. We look forward to the book coming out. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. We're going to go back to our panel. We're going to start with Janice, because you've been navigating this male-dominated world for the majority of your career, and you started out before there was this extra emphasis on appropriateness, and particularly in the church and civil rights organizations, we see all sorts of inappropriate things happening. So how do we balance the sins of what were, but not overreact to things now where every single slight is considered a Me Too moment?
I think Melody put her hands on it, and it's about balance. And it's about being confident enough and assured enough that the society will back you up to be able to say, no, you know, I'd really prefer that you call me Janice. And it's also about, you know, sometimes we as women want to have it both ways. We want to be dainty and attractive and submissive because we think that's sexy or whatever, appealing. But we also don't want to be taken advantage of. And so you have to pick your spots, I think, so that when you're in a business environment, don't be laughing and grinning and carrying on and acting like it's all right sometimes, and then go home and tell your girlfriend how creepy it was. If it was creepy, say so. He'll get over it. And then be authentic. I think, what do y'all say? Keep it 100. keep it real, and then generally you're on safe ground. But I, for one, am delighted that young women are able, and older women, whoever, are able to express when they feel discomfort. Because I grew up in an era, I kept something heavy on my desk. So if somebody came around my desk, I could club them with it. And I didn't tell my dad because he'd have killed him. And, you know, so I'm glad the young women now have more options than something heavy on their desk.
I'm telling y'all, Candace made a 6'5" man cry right in front of me when I was 19. Broke him down to the cellular level. And Amisha, you're navigating this this world now in politics and in media, but do you think there will be what they're calling a man-lash, where men backlash and just say, you know what, If I can't shake your hand, if I got to be on eggshells around you because I'm going to get on the cover of Time magazine, if I say hi to you, you're not coming to drinks. You're not coming to happy hour. You're not coming to the cigar bar. You're not coming to the golf course with us. And women miss out on opportunities because of that. How can we prevent that from happening? You don't want men to turn into Mike Pence, where you won't even be in a room with a woman without his wife present just to protect himself.
Know thyself. Mike Pence may need to not be in that room. But I will say that I think that we're already there. There are instances that I know of where there are men who are in high positions who have interviewed young females that they will not bring on because of an instance where they might compliment them on a dress that was nice one day and then them be out of fear that tomorrow they may not have their position anymore. So I definitely think that this is something that is happening today. I also believe that there is an important distinction we need to make between Me Too and something like the accusations around Joe Biden. Because as a millennial woman, I've always felt extremely comfortable telling somebody that you are in my personal space. I grew up in the South where everybody hugs everybody. But moving back to Chicago, it's like everybody does not do that. So I think that there's a regional thing. There's also an age thing there. My grandfather hugged everybody. He was a Joe Biden type character himself. I grew up seeing that. But I will say that in a workplace, to Ms. Janice's point earlier, there are young women and women who aren't so young who smile, who are a little bit more outgoing and things, and it seems like they're a little bit more welcoming to that type of behavior. So when you're that person and it's received in that way and that person is returning it to you, it is very confusing to me that a few days later or a few years later, you come back and now this is a problem, when at the time, it didn't seem to be a problem for either of the parties. Right. So I think that there has to be that distinction as well. All
right, quick comment from Mike on this. How have you modulated your behavior out of fear of Me Too accusation?
Well, first, full disclosure, Vice President taught me in law school, so... and he used to walk around the room, and he would put his hand on everybody, so everybody knew that was the senator. It doesn't excuse it. I have to commend the women that came out because they didn't take it to the next step of feeling harassed or assaulted. They told the truth, and that also helps in this kind of whole environment of everything so in a microwave oven of politics and ugliness. They said, you know what? It was just creepy. I just wanted the world to know it was creepy. I felt uncomfortable. And to the Vice President's credit, he came out with his video. I don't know, and I don't know if the joke at the speech the next day was helpful, but I thought his video was right on point. And I think when folks ask the Vice President to say sorry, man or woman, it is very difficult to find a politician that says sorry. Because once you say sorry that first time, then no matter what mistake you make, you gotta get sorry, and it kind of keeps going. So I get that. It's just an interesting time that we're in, and we have to be careful. I'll tell you what my grandfather and father taught my sister, and I try to do that, at least to be respectful. A lot of the onus is on men to be much more respectful than we are. But my grandfather and father taught my sister, when you're somewhere, stick your hand out first.
Great
once
point.
that hand is out, that the barrier is not, and you're polite and you're nice and you're shaking hands, but that doesn't mean that stops the hug, definitely. So anyway, I think there's different ways people can approach
Defense
things.
mechanisms.
And then same thing. So when I was going in a room, and I'm one of those kind of huggy people, not anymore. I can't be.
Yeah, it changes the way you act.
It's changed. So now if a woman sticks her hand out, or I'll put my hand out first. And if she says, Michael, I can't believe you're not hugging me. It happened the other night. Well, you don't know me anymore. So then I did.
Or what you do, you have a signed release and a notary public with you to consent to the hug that you're about to take part in. You keep it in file. All right, we're about to go to a quick break.
My message is about changing our way of thinking about women in abuses of power. Law professor Anita Hill.
Today's HBCU Giving Day School is Arkansas Baptist College. Arkansas Baptist College was founded in 1884 and is located in Little Rock, Arkansas. Notable alumni include Michael Dyer, Lewis Jordan, William T. Dixon, Pastor Charles Harrison Mason, and many more. To support Arkansas Baptist College, please visit arkansasbaptist.edu. That's arkansasbaptist.edu. calling all HBCU alumni, including me, Clark Atlanta University, students and leaders, enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement their proposal. The deadline to apply has been extended to April 15, 2019. Go to fgb.life for more information and to apply. Ford goes further in our community. All right, we're going to toss over to our panel for some final thoughts. And one thing that I think is the overarching kind of theme that we've seen through many of these stories is the changing of standards and the articulation of standards, whether it be the Joe Biden context of how you change the way you talk to or approach coworkers or people in a professional setting versus the way it was 50 years ago. Standards and consistent standards when it comes to police officers when they interact with people, that you don't treat rich people and poor people differently. You don't treat young African-American men and old white ladies differently, having those consistent standards. So with the shifting of times and shifting of the narratives, how do you think we can get everybody on the same page when it comes to what's appropriate? Because as we said, in that police situation, there are plenty of police officers, a couple of them texted me during the show, saying they saw nothing wrong with that interaction. They thought the police did everything right. And they can't understand what the problem is. The same thing with the Joe Biden situation, where there are many people on one side who say, well, I don't see anything wrong that Joe Biden did, and then other people who say, hey, I don't need no creepy 70-year-old white man rubbing my shoulders at work. You don't need to rub my shoulders to be at work. It's not involved. So how can we get people on the same page on many of these issues? I'm going to toss it to Amisha first.
I think that first we have to recognize that culture does shift things. If we're talking about policing issues, one of the things first and foremost is that what we see is that a lot of what occurs in black communities just simply does not occur in white communities. If this was a 16, 17-year-old young white male, we would not have even had that video. He would have got off with a citation, or maybe the police would have just drove right by and not stopped him at all. I think that it's very important that as we look towards where culture is going, that we also take cues from our past that help us to navigate the future.
And Janice, we talk a lot about the different way the different generations handle things. As you said, your solution to issues might have been keeping a heavy object on the desk. And I also think we need to applaud the young man's mother in that situation, because my mama would have been under the jail. They would have been taking all of us to jail if you put handcuffs on my mama. Like, I don't think y'all understand exactly how this would have went, and it would not have gone well for anybody. But how do we navigate these cultural shifts, these generational shifts, where maybe the young people can learn not to be so uptight and sensitive at all times, but also we can hold people accountable by today's standards, even though they can use the excuse like, look, I'm old. It was okay back in my day to come rubbing somebody on the shoulders at work. That's just what we did. How can we kind of modulate those two things?
I don't know if you will ever modulate behavior to the extent that we probably need to. I think about the 50s and the 60s when we went from a rigidly segregated society to a more egalitarian democratic society. What came first was that the law changed, and people eventually over time adjusted their behavior. The law changed in 1954. I was born in 1954. I didn't go to an integrated public school until 1967. It took a long time for behavior to catch up with the law. And so I think we may be in another one of those moments when it comes to Me Too or police brutality. First, we got to work on changing the structure of things, which was your point. The other thing that disturbs me a little bit is that we can't give up on the project of democracy. We can't let ourselves become so cynical that we think that what separates us is bigger than what binds us together. And so when you see people willing to shave points with voter suppression because they think they may no longer be in the majority, or you see people willing to appoint right-wing judges because they're afraid that the court systems may not favor them as much as they used to, not only do we have to play by the same set of rules, now we have to honor the rules that got us to where we are now. I think that would be helpful.
And Michael, piggybacking on Janice's point about changing laws, changing policy, what we saw from the LGBTQIA PK+ community about a decade ago was that they petitioned to change the standard for marriage, to legalize gay marriage. They knew they couldn't do it on an ad hoc state-by-state level, and therefore they went straight for the throat. They got the federal courts to give marriage equality, and we've seen their rights and their privileges skyrocket since then. Us, on the other hand, we haven't been able to have those same either courtroom victories in the last decade and particularly legislative victories for our community in the last decade. How can we push our issues into the legislative space and have candidates take them seriously? Because on the one hand, you have, well, Democrats pretty much count on getting 90% of our vote in every election. And then Republicans figured, I don't need y'all's vote to win, so why bother even reaching out to you? So because of that, it puts us in a kind of neuter middle ground position where we can't really force change. How do we fix that?
Well, it starts with folks understanding that elections have consequences. And when you stay at home, you're voting for the other person. And our folks, we are great armchair quarterbacks. We're great at the day after the election. See, I told you my vote didn't matter. It didn't matter. Nothing's going to change anyway. We have to get away from that mentality. That's first. And then black folks have to hold black leaders accountable. You got to hold your own folks accountable. You mentioned the GLBT marriage equality bill. I co-wrote that here in the District of Columbia, heterosexual black male, and I came under enormous pressure from the black bishop community, the black religious community here in town, and they supported me. I mean, it was a very difficult decision, but you had to have some courage to stand up and say, you know what, folks, it's the right thing to do. And the example I did, look, I can never get into any kind of biblical debate with my pastor who supported me. But I looked at it as, remembering back in Jim Crow South days, you're a person of color, you got married, the state didn't even recognize your marriage. It's a civil rights issue. So let's not get into it. I chose, everyone has to pick their own path on how you deal with a particular political issue. And I chose not to get into a biblical conversation. I said, this is a civil rights issue. I'm gonna be on the right side of history. And then you work it out and you keep it moving. The next time, when I mentioned gentrification earlier, and new folks were coming into the city, and they were complaining that on Sundays they couldn't park after they came back from shopping. And I went into a community meeting and said, when you moved in, you saw the church there, didn't you? You know what's going to happen on Sunday. You just have to have a level of courage to be able to stand up, and it'll be okay. Sometimes you get voted out. That's life. So leaders have to be accountable to the citizenry, and the citizenry have to hold your leaders accountable.
Yeah, and you make a great point on that, because part of the issue of accountability is that when you have folks who have been in office 20, 30, 40 years, they stop being so accountable to the voters and become more accountable to the donors. They become more accountable to their committee positions or to what subcommittee they're going to sit on. You know, we saw last week where the House Democrats said any firm that works with insurgent or candidates who are going to challenge incumbents will no longer be able to do campaign work with the DCCC. Yeah, and I think because of that, we end up with bad public policy because people no longer are answering to the voters. They're answering to the people who keep them in office. With that, thanks, Robert Patillas here for Roland Martin. I want to thank our guests. I want to thank our panel, Janice Mathis, Michael Brown, and Miss Misha Cross. Thank you so much for joining us. Tune in tomorrow.